as per usual. Hi everybody, here we are. We're live. So, and as you just saw when the stream went live, we are joined by someone who used to be a familiar face among our little group here and hasn't been able to join us for a while. But Vovacat17, Vladimir is here.
Oh, hey people, I'm here. I'm alive.
Yes. He's alive.
I still exist, if you remember that.
We're very glad of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah,
we're
no,
very happy that you could join us.
No, I'm really willing to answer people's questions from the chat if you can ask them to me. Like that would be interesting.
Oh yeah, I'll keep an eye on the chat as well.
I'm just glad you haven't been drafted.
Yes.
No, I haven't. It's very much a question of me having this what we call a white ticket. It's basically on a medical condition. I'm not to be drafted like into the basic conscript army, and this is like a whole different thing because the standard like conscript army draft was happening every year twice way before the war. It's like a Soviet thing. It's always been there. And so yeah, we went out and proven that I'm basically not fit for that. And again, for now, that's interesting because even now, even during the war, even in this whole stuff, that part, the conscripts, basically the 18-year-olds that get drafted against their will in this way, from what we know, they are not being sent to the front lines. They probably only are stationed at the border, if anything. Because, again, from what every commenter I know talks about, Putin is still afraid of doing that particular thing. Because that's one of the things that destroyed Soviet Union, in a way. The war in Afghanistan, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan back in the day. And back in the day, during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and the level of victims there was like already much lower than right now during this war, but still. Those young conscripts, 18-year-olds, they were being sent there, God knows where, and then basically came back dead or broken. And basically this is how the Society of Soldiers' Mothers was born, this organization, which is now cracked down upon, but before the war was like really big. One of the few really strong social organizations in Russia. Basically the mothers of those 18-year-olds who are really not big fans of the whole event.
I was going to say, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that organization, because I don't think a lot of people know about it.
No, not a lot of people know about it, and it wasn't political in a sense. It wasn't fighting to abolish conscription or change the people in power or basically anything. It was more of a union. It was more of an organization that was basically keeping an eye out for those kids and trying to prevent like the worst of the worst happening in that conscription army. Because again, as I told you before, that conscription army, the closest analogy would probably be like a mandatory 1-year prison sentence. It was very prison-like, it still is very prison-like, and from what we see during the war right now, the entirety of the army is very prison-like. It's basically a system of fear. There's no respect there.
One thing that I think is important for people to remember too, because obviously I want Ukraine to maintain their territorial sovereignty and everything, and I'm glad that they've made gains. But at the other hand, remembering that the people, that there's innocent people dying on both sides, and that so the quicker that it gets over, the better for everybody. And because the thing is too, I was talking with a friend, and I think I was reveling in Ukraine's successes maybe a little too much, and he reminded me, hey, there's a bunch of dead guys on, not just on Ukraine's side, but also on the Russian side. That
I was doing pretty much the same, because looking at basically the things that are happening behind the lines, at least on the Russian side, from what I know, a lot of those people, I know it sounds heartless from me, but a lot of those people, I don't really miss them. It's like many of them are innocent, many aren't. You got to realize that basically the moment the army entered, the Kiev region, you remember the part, right? basically when they left, what was left behind, and the video recordings we got of those people basically pillaging. I know this is what's happening when an army captures some place. I know this is what's happening, but at the same time, like, why are you doing this?
Right.
Like, nobody ordered you to do that, for sure. Maybe they did. Maybe they actually did. It's not known. But still, again, it was a long time ago. Right now, this is not what's happening. Right now, the lines are very stable, and so pretty much we don't get much news.
Okay,
that's always been like a question for me. Hi everyone, I'm Edie. I'm one of Steve's many Patreons. Hi Steve.
Hi, Edie. Glad you could join us.
No, I'm happy. I was finally able to make a Sunday chat after years and years and years. But it's always, but the whole thing. I would show my face, but I'm putting makeup on.
You're right.
No pressure.
No worries.
There are people who make bank doing exactly that on YouTube. Oh my goodness.
You know, right. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no. I arrived on a family trip here to visit family here in New York. I arrived just when the UN was in session. So traffic's crazy, and I'm just thinking to myself, all of this is because, the president is in town. We have the General Assembly. We literally have the journey to Babel. Make that a Star Trek reference right there. But the President Zelensky was here in town too. And all that kept going through my head again and again and again was the sheer unnecessary nature of this conflict. They are, there was already land snatching in Crimea and whatever. Yep. Whatever. No one was rattling sabers, and it literally seemed to start because the guy at the top wants to be a czar again. Well, he wants to be even more of a czar than he already is, and because of his desire to become like this overwhelming czar, a lot of young people are dying. A lot of young men are dying. A lot of families are dying. There's all this destruction. Mm-hmm. Nobody asked for this. Nobody was clamoring for a war. Everybody wanted money. It strikes me the absolute futility of it all. It's just horrible. And and I know there is, at least amongst my circle of friends, it's very much gung-ho Ukraine. Let's show these motherfuckers what. But I'm also thinking I'm watching these Russian soldiers who are being ordered to go into these long convoy trails, and they're being hyped up. And I do think, I forgot his name already. I'm so sorry. But what he was saying, well, maybe they were ordered to. Well, I think they were hyped up. I think they're hyped up and told to do all sorts of things. I know that there are, running commercials in certain areas of the Russian Federation, telling the guys, hey, let's go to Ukraine and claim Ukraine as our own. They're saying the quiet part out loud, but it's really. It's just struck me at how unnecessary and unwanted. Like, who asked for this? Yeah, Putin asked for this.
Well, it was the same story in Vietnam 50 years ago. I mean, basically,
Vietnam was entirely organized. Yeah, exactly.
The Gulf of Tonkin incident was completely manipulated, and Johnson used that as an excuse to escalate the war. And I mean, Vlad talks about, the mindset going on, with Russians right now. I'll guarantee you the same mindset was going on with students, college students in the United States back in the mid to late 60s and early 70s. And I know because I went through that shit. And it was I had a 2S deferment for the first 4 years. For those who don't know, that's a student deferment for those who are going to college. My problem is I was a lousy student. I come into my 5th year and I'm 1A. And you want to say wake up call, boys and girls?
Yeah.
I was scared out of my brains.
Of course.
And
Bad.
the one thing that saved me was the fact that Richard Nixon did the one smart thing he ever did in his entire tenure. He ended the draft. Because if he hadn't, yours truly would have come back here in a box.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I was like,
I was going to wave to Edie from New Jersey.
Wave back from Turtle Bay, wave back.
I mean, 2003. I mean, I was in high school when we went to Iraq as well. But I think only a few of my friends and my father would say that war is necessary. So well, Fofocat, I don't think we can hear you if you were saying anything.
I'm sorry, no, I'm not saying anything.
No
I'm
problem.
practicing a speech.
Okay. I was like, I want to make sure you heard
that was his name. Robocat. Hello, sir.
Hello. I mean, sir is a big word. Nobody
problem.
ever told me that.
I think
you call me sir. I turn around and look for my father, Vovacat Senior.
No, I mean my father certainly was no Vovacat Senior. He's a freaking apocalyptic prepper somewhere north of Moscow, and he doesn't want to talk to anyone.
Off the grid.
I just thought everyone would like to see Flash because he's
that's a neat puppy dog there, Joe. He's wonderful.
Yeah, he's an old gent. He's over 13 now, but he has become the adoptive father of our two-year-old dogs who are from the same litter.
Oh, that's great.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, so you probably already answered this question, but Matthew has a question of how much of the news and information from outside are you able to receive, and in perspectives from outside the official political line?
I am capable of receiving all the news. I mean, thanks to YouTube and Telegram, those are still open. Those are not locked away because, again, back in, I believe it was 2018, our information ministry tried blocking Telegram. They failed miserably. They basically denied half the internet for a day. It was hilarious. Basically, half of Russian government service websites stopped working because they were using dynamic IPs from Google and Amazon, and those rotate constantly. And if you block, they blocked 19 million IPs, and then half the internet went down. Nobody knew which half at any moment of the day.
Here's a question actually about Telegram, because some of a lot of YouTubers that I watch that do coverage of the war. Use Telegram because YouTube is it's interesting. YouTube has cracked down on small channels that do war coverage, but then the Sun or any of the big channels, they get away with doing whatever they want. And I generally prefer to watch the small channels if I can. And so a lot of them also have Telegram channels, and I've been concerned about is Telegram is it a security risk or
No, the Telegram has interesting history because Telegram has actually been started by one Pavel Durov, and he is the guy who was initially behind Kontakty VK, the largest Russian social network still to this day. And when he developed it, he was an independent student guy. Basically, he was pretty much cosplaying to Zuckerberg back then, and he was yeah, I can do that too, and he could. And basically, he succeeded. And it was your pirate haven. It had a lot of non-licensed music. It had non-licensed video. It had all kinds of not for children stuff. And more I believe it was 12 years ago or so. Basically, VK was taken over by Russian government, and basically hostile takeover stuff. And Russian government does that to all of the business that's large enough for that matter. It's why European partners didn't really like working in Russia even before the whole war and the whole Crimea thing, because Russia, since basically Putin came into power, had this tendency to either put an oversight on any kind of business in there, or basically go take it over and basically gift it to one of the local oligarchs. That's how oligarchs got in power, basically. That's how they gained all that business stocks. It was stolen for them.
Yeah.
So kleptocracy in the very literal sense of the word, not just in terms of people in power doing it for personal gain, but also people in power being literal thieves.
State-sponsored theft.
Yeah, state-sponsored theft. That's the entirety of Russia, basically, from the year 2000. And so that's what happened to VK, and since then VK basically turned into a listening post, and it's not like it doesn't even pretend to be encrypted. And then Pavel Durov emigrated, and then he created Telegram.
Oh, okay.
So, and he created it to be like an totally unbreakable crypto thing, not cryptocurrency, but like crypto, you know,
Crypto comms?
Like
crypto communication, like end-to-end asymmetric, you know, the stuff.
Like,
So,
like WhatsApp.
Yeah, but not Facebook.
Yes, exactly. Matthew has a follow-up question of how accurate is the coverage of those of us in the U.S. are getting about the news of what's going on in Russia?
I watch MSNBC, and it's not a lot actually, because here in Russia, it's a lot of, again, you got to remember, this entire endeavor, this entire war thing, it was already mentioned, but this was initially a matter of internal politics. Yeah. Basically, the entire reason for this conflict existing is one guy wants to stay in power. Yeah. One guy is afraid of becoming irrelevant. That's the big thing about Putin. His biggest fear. He is afraid of becoming irrelevant.
Gee, where have we heard that before?
Yeah. And so in 2012, when he came in power for the second time, basically interpreting the word of the new constitution to his favor, like in the constitution, it was written that no person can be in power for 2 consecutive terms. And he used the word consecutive for his measure. Again, in Russian, it's even less clear. It's like 2 straight terms, you know. And so when he served his 2 terms from 2000 to 2008, until the guy Medvedev came in power, and when that guy Medvedev came in power, it felt like it felt better, because again, I was a kid back then, I didn't know, but right now it seems like it was basically the era of the Russian internet getting its footing in the populace. Because before 2008, internet was basically a toy for the enthusiasts. Yeah. And in 2012, like, we already have iPhones, we already have mobile internet, we already have all of it. So everybody uses internet. And back in that day, the government still didn't realize that the internet is not a toy. And Medvedev was like, yeah, we will take all of the government functions and put it on the internet to use. And I mean, it worked in a way, but it still sucks. Yeah, I mean,
I'm interested to know, because it's a period of Russian, I guess, history now, we'd call it. Yeah, I'm not sure, because my understanding of Medvedev, I can't pronounce Medvedev. Thank you. Was that he was essentially Putin's puppet, basically. Yeah, he was there for those 4 years, so that then he could step down and basically come back, and then Putin was still running stuff as prime minister, I think.
Yeah, Putin was prime minister during Medvedev's presidency. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I remember that. He was, I mean, I know, I you know, obviously Vlad knows better than any of us, but I know, like, the perception certainly in this country during that period was that Medvedev was basically just a seat warmer. You know,
he was, but at the same time, he had a very different take on foreign policy, because still it was his face everywhere beyond Russia. It was his face talking to Obama. It was his face meeting with Steve Jobs, if I remember. And he was like this neoliberal, pro-internet, pro-business guy, at least at face value. And that face value, it kind of worked. I mean, if you look at your president on TV like every day, and you see what he's doing and what rhetoric he's peddling, you basically follow it. It's not like that doesn't matter at all. It matters.
Yeah, exactly.
And back in that time, everybody kind of was making fun of the Russian government on the internet, and nobody was afraid of it. Like, every single meme back then on the internet was basically, it was not anti-government per se, but it was like anti-bureaucracy. It was like anti-corruption. And that's actually when Navalny comes around, and his main talking points are anti-corruption, and to this day they are. Navalny is a populist. He absolutely follows the flow. When in 2007 people were all of a sudden nationalistic, anti-migrant, he was the same. When people suddenly became more liberal, he was the same. He doesn't have his own political point of view. He's like the opposition, and that's about it. But that's again, I don't want to criticize the guy because he's like in the worst possible conditions in Russian prison for the third year straight, and and that's horrifying.
Well, Navalny strikes me as being a populist who actually gives a damn about the people. I mean, what a concept.
He does. He's just apolitical like the rest of the Russian people. He just follows the flow.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's something to be said for somebody who wants, how do I phrase this, who doesn't necessarily have their strong political beliefs on their own, save for he wants what the people want.
Yeah.
Well, especially in a society where there's a history of authoritarianism in the government.
A long history of authoritarianism.
Like what you hope for in that situation is to use the American equivalent, is a well-stocked cabinet with the brightest people in whatever field they're supposed to be in charge of. So
and one more thing I wanted to say. Again, you back there in America, I believe right now you experience polarization of society, is what it's called. Kinda.
You might say that.
Right now here there's always polarization, but like for a whole entire different reason. And the polarization here right now is much more silent. It's much more like because one side has it all and the other side is also very adamant about its beliefs, like me, like the anti-war side, but we're not allowed to speak. So it's a different kind of polarization. It's the kind of you're not speaking about it in public in any way. It's very silent. And also before the war, like what I gotta say, you had polarization, we had depoliticization, what we call it. Basically, the idea was that talking about politics was impolite in any place and in any way. That was a very big part of what Putin was trying to do actively during his reign, basically. The idea to make any kind of, basically what you call partisan politics, impolite. Like to make political views impolite. To make the idea of people having a say in politics impolite.
See, the thing is, I actually think we need more polarization here, and what I mean by that is there are a bunch of people who are apolitical, who basically think it doesn't matter. Either both sides are the same. It's the usual shit, and what ends up happening is that I think most of them, or at least a majority of them, if not most, would tend to be against the fascism, against the authoritarianism, but because they don't take the time to, a modicum of time to pay attention to what's actually going on, that their lack of participation allows the bad stuff to go on, allows the gerrymandering to happen, allows the rise of authoritarianism and all this. Because they're like, well, both sides do bad things. Like, yeah, but that's like saying, getting punched in the face is equal to getting stabbed in the heart. It's like, well, they're both bad.
Exactly.
They're both bad. But
there's a matter of degree.
Exactly.
Which, gerrymandering. How did it even become legal? That's so transparent.
Well,
that's such a transparent power grab.
How
did it even start out as legal?
That's one of those things that's just become, not everybody accepts it. A lot of people have a big problem with it, but it's become such an entrenched part of our politics that
it's like electoral college. Like it's transparently unfair. How is it still a thing?
Because it's really difficult to change that. That's why
we just started doing it and never stopped. Like there's no, there's really no other explanation.
No constitutional amendment thing.
Well, basically the reason why it continues is that the process to change it would disadvantage the people who currently have an unfair advantage.
Exactly.
they would have to give up their unfair advantage.
Well,
and
and
play
you know,
fair, and they don't want to do that.
my favorite detail about the Electoral College specifically is like so many other things that are wrong with the way the United States government works. It's a remnant of trying to appease slave owners.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
like
And
Yeah.
let me just make another point here. Can I? Sorry
Yeah,
for
please,
intruding,
please.
but you told me you really missed me, and so I want to say many things while I'm here.
Go for it.
And you told me about Electoral College, and that's another thing that I've heard from pro-war people. That's an interesting point. The idea that a land has intrinsic value, opinion, and cultural significance. It's like I told when I argued with one not like pro-war person, but like kind of basically what she was telling me was that like imperial ambition is our destiny, and imperial ambition is our legacy, and imperial ambition is our core value. She was telling me that. Like our country is an empire, has always been an empire. We should be proud.
Like it's just a fact.
That's what.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
That was like her opinion. Yeah, she was like, no, I don't. I want this war to end. I want people to stop dying. But we are an empire. So that was her talking point. And
That's bizarre,
so
because you-
and so when I told her, I'm sorry. Do you want to say
I'm
something?
sorry, but let me mute myself because I'm just agreeing with you.
Okay, go ahead, Bud. Go ahead, Bud.
Go ahead, Vlad.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, she told me, yeah, she told me, yeah, but if we do that and if we do that, there will be like no Russia in the future. And I'm telling you, yeah, I am Russia. You are Russia. We the people are Russia. Nothing else is Russia. And she told me,
Yeah.
and the land? And what about the land? And I'm like, but how does it matter where we live?
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's like, yeah, but again, a lot of Russian imperialism. It's like it has a very special brand to it. Not even imperialism, but like this very grassroots kind of patriotism that comes from the idea of birch trees of all things. It's like we are not just like the people living here. We are the land. So that's why land grabs like matter in this grand scheme of things.
Yeah,
It's like,
I mean that there are Americans who feel that way too. I don't think it's not as deeply rooted, at least, or it's not as prevalent anymore as it used to be. I think the sort of
I would also
imperialist.
argue, Steve, that most Americans, even those who feel that way, would blanch at America being called an empire.
Right.
Oh yes.
America number one. They want America number one for sure. But like,
they
want to call it empire.
The United States had its imperial phase, and we still control some spoils of that, in the form of territories and stuff. But yeah, no, Americans would never. I don't think we would have ever. Unless you're calling
we're just
it
the Fire Nation, not the American Empire.
Yeah,
Okay,
well, exactly.
so, you say
you would
something
refer
too.
to you would use empire. you would use empire rhetorically, but you would never actually legitimately call it the American Empire, like sincerely. That you're right. That would not. We would never say that.
Oh, Nick, you have a point.
Okay, I want to say like one of the
empire.
one of the things that's driving polarization. You notice how like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and many of these, like on the right especially, they're always trying to go viral. They're just trolls. It's because that whole party has made the miscalculation that social media engagement translates to votes.
Right.
They can get people really riled up on Twitter, then they'll show up.
And who did they learn that from?
And as we saw from the last couple,
on the right, especially, always trying to go viral. They're just
Russell. That you got the stream on like okay, yeah. Russell.
But anyway, as we saw with the midterms, that doesn't really work. Just
not anymore.
Being a troll on Twitter doesn't get you a seat.
Yeah,
just like going
refreshed and I muted it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
just like going to rallies doesn't translate to votes either.
It's like what Nick is saying. He's describing. There's a joke for it. When you say I'm internet famous, what you're really saying is I'm not famous.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
But the other thing is that they're trying to fan the flames because they thrive in division. They thrive in chaos. So they want us to all be at each other's throats because that helps them.
Here's the thing: is that for the well, certainly for Marjorie Taylor Greene, it does translate to votes just because she's in a super conservative district. So it works on that limited scope, but it doesn't work in the general populace.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Boebert not so much. Boebert is very likely going to get unseated in 24.
She barely scraped by last.
She barely scraped. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the same with MTG actually. So where she's from, she's around like Rome in Georgia, not Rome in New York, but
very different places.
Very different places indeed. And if you look at her numbers when she got in, she basically got in just squeaking by. And so, you know, with the both of them carrying on the way they do, the complete lack of interest in helping their home districts. It's all about them hogging the limelight. But you know, Boebert is not doing anything for her district in Colorado. She's just been a yes woman in committees and stuff. The same with Greene. Greene has had to like actually follow the other Democrat and Republican representatives in Georgia to fix, you know, things like urban use and that sort of thing. She hasn't come up with anything in committee. So the both of them just, as Nick said, they just exist to be social media
influencers
and influencers. That's exactly what they are. And you will notice
to be fair to MTG, she's only been on committees since January.
Yeah. So, and
why is that?
Because they're dumb. I'll tell you.
For sure.
I'll say that. I mean, they're in terms of Greene is a businesswoman and everything else. But to be honest, when it comes to that type of minutia type of state work, they're not cut out for it. They really aren't.
Well, because they don't literally, even though they're in government, they literally don't understand the function of government.
That's one of the big differences. I am usually very wary about people who, you know, sort of lament the passing of the old Republican Party and it's not the way it used to be, and you know what happened to my beautiful Republican Party.
This has always been.
Well, because politically, in terms of their policies and in terms of what they want to accomplish, they haven't changed in 50 years, if not longer. No. They've always been horrible. They're not any worse now than they ever were. But one of the differences is if you go back in time 30 or 40 years, if you go back to when I was a kid, the Republicans still wanted to do absolutely awful things. They still wanted to screw over poor people and people of color and all you know, they had
welfare queens. They called welfare queens.
They were awful, and they wanted to enact awful policies. But most elected Republicans who held high office were at least reasonably intelligent people.
Right.
It didn't make them any better for.
Oh, no.
You know, no, it didn't make them any better for the people, but at least they were reasonably intelligent people. Ronald Reagan would be an exception to that. Yeah. And unfortunately, he was president for 8 years. Yes. But like George H.W. Bush was a really smart guy. I would never have voted for him in a million years, but George H.W. Bush was a reasonably intelligent guy.
He also got in trouble for lying. Can we go back to that? He said, "Read my lips, don't do taxes," and he lied. They got criticized.
Exactly.
You look at the most prominent elected officials in the Republican Party today, and I mean they don't have. And I know IQ is a problematic thing. I'm just using it as a metaphor here. But you know they don't have 2 IQ points to rub together between them. I mean they're just they're deeply unintelligent people.
Well, the other thing too,
unserious people. I think that has to be unserious people.
Yeah. Unserious, incurious, and willfully ignorant. And that's the one big thing too, because the Republicans of old, as horrible as they were, they had at some weird level, they actually gave a fuck about the United States. They thought that their horrible policies would actually do something good, even though they wouldn't. But they thought that they would, on some level, they believed that those policies would actually do something positive.
And they lacked
and they also
and
they also at a certain level were pragmatists, and so that at least at times they would compromise to get things done. The current one sees compromise as surrender.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Steve, the one thing that
yes,
I've noticed, this really just occurred to me recently, and that's the fact that the Republicans, especially in the last half of the 20th century, seem to really lean on names. And those names start, of course, with Eisenhower. And of course, everybody knew about Eisenhower because he was the head of Shives during World War II. Mm-hmm. He spearheaded, the Normandy invasion, that whole 9 yards. And I mean, as a president, he was at least reasonable. Although, again, having read One Nation Under God, I also know that he was also instrumental in helping to introduce religion into government, despite the fact. And of course, after that, there was Nixon, who essentially made a name of himself. And and he was, just supposedly going to be this great hero who was going to get us out of Vietnam. Yeah, right. Tell me another one. And the next name after that, of course, was Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. I mean, Bush Sr. was, semi-reasonable. I'll agree with you on that. But no new taxes buried him immediately.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you had to have Bush Jr.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And finally, what may be the ultimate name being Donald John Trump. They go for names. Whereas Democrats, as I see it, have been going for people who are A, electable, and B, competent.
Well, here's the irony of that, because they loved when Obama was running, they're like, oh, he's a celebrity. They like to lambast the Democrats, like, you're just voting for celebrity. I'm like, no, that's literally what you guys have done for 60 years.
Exactly.
And here's the funny thing about Nixon, though, and again, here where there is a real shift within the Republican Party. There used to be liberal Republicans. Bob Packwood, unfortunately, he had a zipper problem that was worse.
Yeah.
But beyond that, he was actually a liberal Republican. And if you think about also, and again, as corrupt as Nixon was, he created the EPA.
Yes, he did.
He created OSHA. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about. So this is a Republican that did two, reasonably progressive things back when they weren't, the babies with a stick party.
Well, let's also remember there was a country that was much closer to the era of 90% marginal tax rate on the wealthiest Americans, and was just 8 years past the Great Society.
Yeah, right. Well, actually, David Graeber, the late anthropologist, may rest in power, kind of like a thought of something or noticed something. He said, like, okay, the New Deal, which was beneficial, the greatest economic movement for like the USA country as were for white people. Let's remember that. Is brought into like so much like to like everyone that like what came afterwards, the free love hippie movement, as it were. He kind of like theorized that the old elites kind of like saw the free love hippie movement and go, look what our children are doing after like a great New Deal. We can't have that. And so then austerity kind of started on Nixon, but ramped up under like Reagan.
But keep in mind too that Nixon was also the man who came to power in the time of the quote silent majority end quote. When supposedly there were all these conservative people who were being ignored, and supposedly they had to show their power, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which was mostly bullshit. Yeah. But it succeeded, and it got Nixon in the White House.
One more knock on Eisenhower. When the GI Bill first happened, black people were specifically excluded.
Yeah. I'll also just pop on another on Eisenhower. I'm Iranian. I just leave it there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There you go.
Not just Iran.
There you go.
End of conversation. Well, and even when the thing about the GI Bill, the thing about the original GI Bill, even though they eventually made it so that like legally the original GI Bill wasn't segregated, it was still like there were all kinds of practical roadblocks thrown up that made it more difficult for black veterans to take advantage of it, even though legally they were entitled to the same things as white soldiers. It was more difficult for them to actually realize those benefits, which again was a strategy that the Republican Party has stuck with ever since. They say, oh no, we're not racist. Like on paper, it's completely fair, but when you get into the actual reality of it, it's a lot more difficult.
Well, this is why every time I hear libertarians say, show me in the law where it's not equal, I want to punch them in the fucking face.
Oh God.
Well, there's anytime I hear that nonsense, I'm like, please stop. Yes. And you absolutely know better than that. And so I'll share a story related to that. Well, I'll give a pop culture example, make it tangentially like tied to Steve's channel. It's alluded to in the last Indiana Jones film that came out this summer. In the beginning of so we have that beginning, and then we flash to like 1968 or 69, and you have a gentleman, the waiter, who brings up the food and refreshment to the German professor that we find out is a Nazi, because of course, and we find out that this waiter, he was at D-Day. He was a World War II veteran, and the Nazi guy specifically points out, and what did your victory gain? What did you gain specifically from this victory? And it was a very interesting point that I think the movie didn't have like the guts to stick with, but it was a very interesting, that this shows like Steve's point there. The second thing is that when my parents are Caribbean immigrants to New York City, and both of my parents were union workers. They experienced discrimination in their own union, but they were union workers, and they could not get a mortgage to buy their home in Bed-Stuy. On paper, they had the money and the means to buy a house, but nobody was selling them a house, and the only house they could get was in redlined areas, which at that time was Bed-Stuy. And that was fine. They were lucky to get it, but we had to get, and please forgive the term, an Uncle Guido loan in order to buy that house. And now, of course, that house is now worth an ungodly amount of money. But the point being is that, on paper, but in practice, in actual practice, people have been actively discriminated against, and they were actively discriminated against since up until when I was a kid in the 90s. Right?
Yeah.
You still had in practice, you had redlining until the 90s.
Yeah.
So there's the law in paper and there's the law in practice, and the two are not equivalent.
And this is why, and this is something that before, I guess I'll say, before Bill Maher revealed himself to be right wing.
Yeah.
He still thinks he's not, but or at least pretends he's not, but he is. But I remember when Michelle Obama had said that she was, finally proud of her country when Barack got elected, and right wing jumped on her, and Bill Maher actually defended her, and he said, well, no, he said, you want to harken back to the 50s and the 60s. It's like, well, that wasn't so hot for certain people. It wasn't great if you were black or a woman or gay or trans or whatever, and still isn't. It's a little bit better, but it's still not right. Bed of roses. But I mean, even to the point of like, when people have asked me like, well, how come black people haven't come up since slavery, and then you point, it's easy to point to things like Tulsa, and I forget the name of it, was like
Rosewood.
in Arkansas where they Rosewood, and where in Arkansas where
The
they were
entire year of 1919. It was
Red
the
Summer.
Thank you. Yeah, and I couldn't remember it. So where they were just going around just destroying black farms. But
Yes.
I have a story from my own family.
Mm.
An uncle of mine had a place, or his great uncle had a place in Abbeville, Alabama, and he was successful, and he gave credit to other black people. So he was, he had the community on his side. And then, some white people decided that he was just a bit too uppity, and they didn't like that. So they had him declared mentally ill and put into an asylum, and he's lost his business. And then they had him killed in the asylum. So, so it's like, well, that's why, because when we did some shit ourselves, and this is also why, I've asked, people have said to me, like, well, how come, black politics has tended to be, toward the left and toward socialism? And I said, well, when we were a commodity within the capitalist system, so that would kind of make me not so happy about it. And two, when we did try to participate and become part of the system, part of that system, every time we did, people just took our shit away.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So of course it's like, well, we're not, so a lot of people are a little touchy about it because they're like, hey, we tried to participate in your system, and we even kept some away from you, so you didn't have to look at us, and you still came and destroyed our shit.
Also, isn't it kind of just in the title, like people who are referring to themselves as conservatives, they're trying to conserve something, and it's like, if you want to change something, you don't join the conservative side, and things are unequal in that way. Why would you want to conserve that if you wanted to do better?
Right. It's the very idea of progress versus status quo.
And
exactly.
Yes.
one of the things that like I'm conservatives do this a lot. And the Michelle Obama detail, it reminded me of it when, because there's whenever anytime anybody who is like a person of color or an immigrant or a member of like is an LGBTQ person, or anytime anyone from a marginalized group in this country admits that actually they don't really like it here all that much because it sucks for them because, because people outside of their group make it suck for them through discrimination and everything else. Like there's always like this the pearl clutching from conservatives. Like, oh, how dare they say that about America? Oh, they have it so much better here than they would have it in some other country. Like, oh, it's just terrible. And it's
imagine a black person says that, like, I don't want to talk to white people as well, or white people about race as well.
When Michelle Obama said, when my husband was elected, it was the first time I was proud of my country. Oh God, remember Reverend Jeremiah Wright when they played that clip of him saying "God damn America" like over and over again for 24 hours straight on Fox News, and they all took turns just, rending their garments over it. Oh, how could a man of God claim to say something like that about the United States of America? And it's like, I wonder why a person who is a member of a marginalized group who's been stepped on ever since this country has existed would not want to just wave the flag all the fucking time.
Since before the country.
Since before, exactly. Since before the country was officially. I mean, it's like the level of, and I think a lot of it is performative, especially from the people who do it on TV and like try to whip up resentment and stuff.
Try to whip up resentment and get money.
Yeah. Yes. But a lot of it is genuine. I do think that, there are a lot of people who are just raised in that conservative mindset. And part of that, for a lot of people, I know a lot of people in my family, a lot of people from this area that I'm from, a lot of people that I'm sure a lot of us who are from the United States know, that's just sort of, that's inculcated in you from a very young age. Oh, this is a great country. You should love this country. Like, God bless America, USA.
I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Yeah.
The irony to me is when you look at blue collar conservatives who also don't really get a lot of benefit from being Americans either. It's kind of ancillary. It's kind of on the out, but yet they support it, and it's like, because it's almost like it's the whole temporarily embarrassed millionaire. Like, well, now it's going to be better. But
imagine being Native American and being treated like a foreigner in your own country.
Oh,
my
God.
God.
I mean, I
yes.
deal with that.
Like
daily.
I would be telling people, fuck off all day long, 24/7.
I mean, I was at a job
I will
fair.
say whatever I want. Oh, you don't like? Oh, fuck off. Why
I
don't
was at
you
a job
go back
fair.
to where you're from?
I was at
Yeah.
a job fair last week or 2 weeks ago, and because I'm still unemployed, and you know, well, you guys now see the way I dress, and a Russian woman stopped me. She was probably in the United States for like 3 days. Stopped me because she's never seen a real live Native American, so she wanted selfies and then took videos of me.
I hope you charged her. Did you charge her? Did you charge her?
I didn't want to make a scene because I was more so trying to find a job. You know, like we were both there to find work, and I didn't want to make a scene. But you know, it happens all the time. Like because I go traditional. Like I usually wear, you know, feathers in my hair and you know the armbands.
Hair? What hair?
You get treated
Here's
like a
some back
mascot.
there.
Well, yeah.
Oh, okay. There,
I'm actually sporting.
All right.
I'm actually sporting a scalp lock. So, I mean, seriously, like I'm going like 1600 traditional.
Nice,
So
That's awesome.
So
Look, I found one.
The other thing too that reminds me of that though, of that pisses me off to no end is when you get into when trying to deal with conservatives dealing with this issue is sometimes someone will point at me and say, well, Joe, you're successful, you got a business and you're making money and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, and they try to use me as to defeat the idea that there's systemic racism. I'm like, I had to fly to what you could walk to borrow from Chris Rock. You know, it's like I had to be exceptional.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And Joe, I still remember those conversations in a few hangouts back where you talked about, you know, basically being pulled over for driving while black, and and to be honest, I've been doing a little shopping on your behalf, looking for 360 webcams, and so far I'm not turning up too many, unfortunately. But the very fact that you have to deal with that, I mean, you know, nobody's, you know, the guys who say that can't even consider walking in your shoes, never mind actually doing it.
I mean, I'm at to the point where I don't leave the house unless I have to, because
that's bad.
Do not want to, you know, and every time I see a cop car, because again, you know, it's not that it's happened every time, you know, but it's happened enough.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I told the last, you know, bad interaction I had was I was, you know, test driving a car, you know, and it was a used car, but it's a used version of an expensive car. And you know, it's actually, I've got one of those cars now and I had one of them before. But you know, but cop following me, like, you know, and I'm doing this, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not, you know, driving strange. I'm not, you know, because it's not my car, right? So I'm being extra careful because it's not my car. And you know, this cop following me like I'm a criminal. Or the one that pulled me over because I had a tail light out and he came up with his hand on his gun because, you know, you never know, those people with tail lights out, they're real fucking dangerous.
Yeah, it's a sign of imminent violence when there's a tail light busted.
You know, and so I just reached a point where, you know, I just would rather not. I just would, you know, and you know, so actually during COVID when we were all, you know, trapped in our houses, I felt safe. Everybody else was like freaking out, and I'm like, "Oh, this feels good. I don't have to go anywhere."
That's where I think that's a lot of that was a lot of people, a lot of us who are
melanated,
Black, and Latino, when we were constrained or we just needed to go to our house, to our jobs, or if we were working from home, or if we were just caretaking for kids. For the first time in a very long time, for many of us, we felt safe. And I think that's a real indictment on how people are actually surveilled and treated in our society. So when there, I work in IT now, and for a company, and I work hybrid, and I own my own home. And prior to this terrible pandemic that went home, I mean, I would have people, I would be walking into my own house with my own keys, whatever. People are like, oh, do you know who owns that? I'm like, I own this house and I own this garden. And if you don't get out of my face, you know, so, you know, and this is in Portland, Oregon. So when now we had some things pass in Portland about what the police may or may not do. And of course, we do have our issues and problems in Portland, but it's not related to that. But for the first, I'm talking to people that I live with in Portland, Oregon, who own or rent their homes and are able to go into their homes and they don't feel like, you know, they're going to be bullied or hurt by the police. And that's for the first time, for many of them, that's for the first time ever in their lives, you know, and it's because of, you know, we had very hot, for a while there that summer when George Floyd was murdered, that was a very hot time in Portland. It was a very hot time. And so it really showcased that in many cases, the police is of no help whatsoever. And so now we do have more dire things going down, and the police are helping in Portland, and that's because we passed certain things. You can't arrest people if they're doing drugs on the street, and you can't follow people if and people can't call the police on other people, because if you try and do a Karen or a Chad, right? If you try and do one of those, you'll be the person going to jail for wasting time. And so it's a real indictment that if you are we're all persons of color, but if you are darker skinned, right, in this country, or if you're a part of a minority and prior to 2020, you were just used to this constant stress producing bullying. And then with the pandemic, for the first time you feel safe, okay, then there was this other disease called racism, causing people to have this anxiety and stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I think that's interesting, and I just to kind of follow on that in a weird way, is in Philadelphia, you know, just to give an example, we had an issue in my building where there was a drug addict that was shooting up and ended up lighting fire to our trash cans behind the building, which obviously was a little scary. And we were trying to figure out a way to we not have that happen again. And the police essentially were told our building at a local community meeting. This was not at our building. This was a meeting organized by the police for the public, mind you. They basically told us that, well, you all voted for this progressive DA, so it's your problem.
Well, yeah, terrific.
And that was kind of like the first time I kind of saw on the sense of like white folks who are progressives living in a city who are like, they're really just on their own side.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't take part in this latter half of the discussion during the meeting because basically talking about racism in America, for one thing, I have already heard all those talking points you mentioned here, people, and it's important that you mention them. It's just that I already know that stuff. But on the second part, like, I have nothing to add to that because it's not the history of my place. It's not how it happened here. Mm-hmm. But about the police, I had to add something before we finish. Can I take a couple more minutes for that?
Story.
Because one thing about the war and about the whole events we never mentioned was remember the rebellion part, not the rebellion, the insurrection, like the Prigozhin insurrection. Remember that part?
Oh yeah,
That was a big deal, at least here in Moscow. That was like a moment of basically a moment of realization, because when that started happening, I made a joke like immediately in some chats. I said like, yeah, by the morning the billboards will be gone. Guess what? By the morning billboards were gone, and you know what billboards I'm talking about. Basically Wagner recruitment billboards. They were like not everywhere, but they were pretty easy to find if you like drive straight through the road. And basically it was happening during 2 days, and during the first day my mom, which is like, you know, extremely pro-war and basically going down the fascist line with all the talking points about it, including the young people have no, like, they have no qualification to drive this world forward, and this world is going to die because of them. She's like the most toxic mother right now you can imagine, and like she explodes whenever I mention trans stuff, because she like has this strict opinion about kids not knowing what they want. Like until you're like an adult, you have no choices in your life you can make.
With adults just hating kids.
Yeah, and she was like, yeah, and if you are parents who do that stuff to your kids, you're basically doing child abuse, and you have to be jailed, and your kid has to be put in an institution. That's her talking points. But again, during that day, she was the one who was like, because again, during this whole thing, she was like, everything is going according to plan. But during that day, she was like, no, everything is not going according to plan. We didn't talk about it because we agreed to not talk about it like ever. But she was like, no, you're not going to walk outside this day. And I mean, it's not like I wanted to. It was a scary day. But then the next morning, that's the point I want to talk about. Because you know how that insurrection went. You followed the story, right?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
All of you here followed the story. It was like going very well, and then it just stopped because some agreement was reached or something. It was basically one hour is like getting closer and closer to Moscow, and the next hour it's like it was never there. You know the point.
Yeah.
And a week later, Prigozhin is dead.
He's dead. But that's like
but
nobody was surprised by that. What more people were actually surprised by is that there were no like big revelations after his death, because everybody thought that he had leverage, that like he had some secrets recorded somewhere and that information would come out if he's dead, something like that. It would be very him actually to do that, but never mind, it never happened. So what I was actually leading to is that the next morning, well, the whole thing was called off like in the evening. And the next morning, I actually went outside because I was like done sitting in home for like a day and more. And I was actually like taking my future wife out of like one of the not suburbs, but like neighboring cities. Like Moscow is surrounded by those smaller cities that are like adjacent. And she lived there, and I was taking my car basically out there. And before that, I was like walking out of home and getting to one of the like around the clock flower shops because she wanted some particular flowers. And I took like a scooter. I went there. I was like riding around, getting flowers. Like it was 4 a.m. basically. And I saw people on the streets standing outside, talking, drinking something. People who are not your usual kind of drunk people in the like down the house. Basically, people were like so downright scared. Then when this whole thing was over, they were like out in the streets talking to their neighbors, which is like very weird for Russia. It's like not what the people do. It's like we are very wary of our neighbors. It's a big thing. Like it's called atomization of society. Also, what Putin did. And so when I was driving outside of Moscow, I was kind of afraid. Yeah, I'm crossing the city borders, and there are gotta be patrols there. And it was already like 5 or something a.m. and the sun was coming up. And I drove past those patrols, and they were like, it's basically like 4 lanes each way highway. Of course, they would not block it. They just like were standing there on the side, and I were looking at these people driving by them at like 80 kilometers per hour or something. and I saw those people were like downright exhausted. They were like, and I thought at this moment, like this one DMV guy and two armed guys with machine guns right next to you, you would be swept away if something like that column went through the city. And so those people, I would imagine, they were like preparing to die right there and right then that night, or to run away. And so I was like, yeah, guys, you're pathetic. Like you're not in power here. You're in power here in name only. And that's basically how I stopped being afraid of those DMV guys and those patrols, because like whenever something real started happening, they were useless. And the only thing that really saved them was that the whole thing like was called off before it reached Moscow. They would do nothing. They would probably flee, and I would understand.
Oh, you know they would flee. You know they would be the first to run away. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Ask the parents in Uvalde how good the police are.
Oh God! Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. When things like that happen, you realize, and I mean, it would probably be better if we would remember this more often, and if more of us would remember it, so we had strength in numbers. Is that you know, like police are only in charge, and it practically and theoretically, because we have given them that power.
Yeah,
you know, exactly. Like we have police in society, and the sort of the social contract is, okay, we're giving you guys the authority to enforce the laws and keep the peace, and we're agreeing that you can do this, but if you do a bad job or you abuse that power or you mistreat people or whatever, we don't have to keep letting you do it.
Here's the problem, Steve. Look, I understand, like, there have been so many times where I've seen some police brutality video where they're basically trying to do another George Floyd, and there's this crowd of people begging the cop to stop, and there's always that part of me that goes, come on, just rush him, everybody just dogpile the cop right now. But obviously if they did that, the cop and any other cops nearby would just blow everybody away.
Right. Well, I'm not saying they should necessarily, you know, like level up and, you know, start like attacking cops en masse in the moment. But in terms of like overall strategy, you know what I mean? Like if the cops in New York do something fucked up and the next day there's 5 million people in the streets, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Here's one thing. I want to address something from the internal chat. I'm not going to say a name, but this idea that, well, people just complied with the cops to be fewer. You know what? That's horseshit. I watch 5 to 10 police interaction videos a day. Okay, there are tons of people who are completely complying, who still get beat down. Sometimes someone goes, you know, cop says, get out of your car. Okay, hey, can you explain what's going on? Because they delayed a fraction of a second, the guy goes hands on and starts hitting them with shit. This happens all the fucking time. This idea that we should lay down and just submit to everything is horseshit, and that's why it fucking goes on, is that this fucking bullshit attitude. If the cops violate your right, first off, here's the other thing too, you have to assert your rights. The Supreme Court has ruled that you have to assert your rights or else you don't have them. So you have to say, I don't consent to searches. I choose to remain silent. You have to assert that, okay? And refusing an illegal order is not illegal in most places. So this idea that we should fucking lay down, and that if we all did that, because I can show you fucking dozens and hundreds of videos where that didn't fucking happen. So
George Floyd was murdered.
He complied the entire time,
and he was compliant.
Yeah.
So
well, and
the person who said that in the chat needs to like get another sip of tea.
Yeah, Breonna Taylor was asleep.
It's a nice sounding.
Sorry to interrupt. Here's Breonna Taylor's boyfriend. Now he was legally armed, and someone breaks in the house. They don't identify themselves. They shoot through the wall. So he comes out with his gun and he fires back at the intruders who invaded his fucking house.
Yeah,
and they were gonna stitch him up with a whole bevy of crimes for legally defending his own fucking house.
Example.
Oh, what happened? What happened?
Well, here's another example. Since you say George Floyd is just one example,
Michael
Breonna,
Brown, anybody?
yeah,
Tamir
Breonna,
Rice?
somebody, yeah,
Come
Breonna Taylor.
on!
I was gonna the one I've been sitting, the one I've been waiting to mention, and it's similar to what Serious Mind was just saying in terms of like the Philando Castile.
Yeah,
Oh
that's
yeah,
the one I was
that's,
going to bring up
that's
too.
a really good one.
Who told the cop that he had a gun in the car?
Yeah,
he had to legally.
Yeah, he disclosed to the cop that he had a gun that he was legally allowed to have in the car. Yeah. And the cop would never have known the gun was even there. But Philando Castile was trying to do the responsible thing and try to preemptively diffuse any kind of situation by saying to the cop, hey, just so you know, there's a gun in the car. It's mine. I'm allowed to have it. I'm not going to do anything, but just so you know that it's there. And the cop escalated that from there into a situation where Philando Castile was killed.
John Crawford III. Sandra Bland. The list goes on and on. Don't say it's one fucking example.
Yeah,
educate yourself.
And even an example, there was an example. I'll give you another example because there have been examples that I can name from my own area that thankfully never got to be national news because they didn't escalate to the point where someone lost their life. But of police, just throwing their weight around, mistreating people, escalating situations that don't need to be escalated. There was a thing that happened in Hagerstown 5 or 6 years ago where it was briefly like a big deal around here. And I think it might have been picked up on a couple of national news outlets, but it didn't end in violence. So it wasn't that big of a story. But she was just a kid. She was like a 12 or 13-year-old kid, a black girl who was stopped by the police because I can't remember if like her parents were looking for her or she was, not at home when she was supposed to be or whatever. And she was on her bike riding through the city and the cop stopped her. And this became like a whole thing. Like instead of the cop just, saying, okay, hey, your mom's looking for you, you better go home. You know what I mean? Which is all it really had to be. It became like this thing where like they stopped her, they took her bike from her, they were trying to make her sit down on the sidewalk and they were trying to force her to comply with things. And
for the sake of compliance.
Yeah, for the sake of it. And she was like a teenager or a preteen. I'm not sure exactly how old she was. She was, in that age range. And it seemed like she was tired and was fed up with whatever was going on in her life at that time. And like these cops trying to bully her only made the situation worse. And we have body cam video of most of it, and you can see like it's cops trying to domineer her, trying to force her to just do as she's told, and this kid just not wanting to do it. And there's not a single moment where any one of those cops tries to be her friend, tries to talk to her like a human being, tries to do what any person who's ever been a teacher or a guidance counselor or worked with kids in any capacity would know to try and do, to just bring the temperature down and say, okay, you know what? We're not going to yell.
Because they think that isn't their job. Their job is to be the boss.
Yep.
And
they think they're entitled to that compliance. They think they're entitled to that compliance from everyone in any circumstance. And they think, look, I'm the boss, and just because I told you to do something, that's enough where you have to do it. And I'm sorry, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
That's bullshit.
A Georgia SWAT team threw a flashbang grenade into a playpen and burned a 1-year-old. So tell me what the 1-year-old was supposed to do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So anyone who is actually interested in learning what really goes on, a few channels, if you don't mind me plugging them, Steve.
No, please go ahead.
Audit the Audit, the Lackluster Channel, and Civil Rights Lawyer. Those 3 channels, there's tons of them out there, but those 3. I like those particularly because they don't just show the video, they give some commentary and they explain it. Audit the Audit's particularly good because he actually goes out over what the law is and is not in those various states, in the various situations, so that you can see, okay, who's in the right, and he gives people a grade based on how they behave, both the police and the citizen, because sometimes the citizen's at fault. And so he gives. I think he's got a little bit of bias, and not against the cops. When he grades, I find a little bit of bias in his grading, depending on the melanin content of the citizen. But overall, he's still pretty good. Lackluster is also very good. And then there's We the People University, former cop, former sheriff's deputy, who also present videos and also gives commentary. Again, this is he was a cop. He knows all the rules. He knows all the bullshit, and so he's very good too. So if you actually want to know, if you want to see more than one example, you'll see examples. You'll see dozens, hundreds, thousands of examples.
Yeah, I want to wrap up the show here in a minute, but I was just reminded of something else since we're talking about this subject. It seems like it's an example of putting the blame on the wrong side,
Right.
Because like it reminded me of, I used to have arguments with people over like the philosophical question of, okay, if someone's house gets robbed and their door wasn't locked, whose fault is it? And it's like, okay, it's still the fault of the person who robbed them, right? Like you can say, okay. Can say, okay, yeah, like you can say, okay, yeah, maybe you should have had your door locked. Maybe if you had your door locked, they couldn't have gotten into your house and stolen your stuff. But just because someone's door is unlocked, that doesn't mean it's okay to go into their house and take their shit. And
what was she wearing?
Yeah,
exactly.
And if a cop, so you could say like, even if it's a situation where the citizen interacting with the cop, like let's say it was someone who like mouths off to a cop, right, and was being aggressive,
which is not illegal, by the way.
Which is not illegal, and let's say that's all they did. They were just a cop. They saw a cop and they saw a cop and they did something rude to the cop, right? They mouthed off to him, or they gave him the finger, or the cop, said something to him and they said something smart ass back. If that person was not causing any other kind of disturbance, if they didn't have any kind of weapon on them, if they weren't being threatening, if they weren't doing anything else but just giving a little bit of shit to a cop, that does not justify the cop being abusive to them. Now you could say, well, maybe they should have been a little smarter and not mouthed off to that cop. Okay. It doesn't justify what the cop did.
It doesn't justify.
Exactly. Even if the person did commit a crime, they should still be like tried on the jury with a
if a cop catches you carrying a stereo out of a store that you didn't pay for, and that ends up with the cop killing you, the cop is the one who did something wrong there. I mean, okay, you shouldn't. Yeah, you got caught shoplifting. Okay, you did the wrong thing.
The problem is
you weren't going to kill anybody.
The problem is we live in a culture that believes that stuff is more important than lives. That
You're
even
absolutely
the smallest like useless piece of crap is worth killing somebody. Because capitalism.
Right.
We live in a culture where guns are more important than people.
Well, right, and we seem to have this attitude, and it's a very Calvinist idea that, well, if you did something wrong, whatever is done to you, no matter how harsh, no matter how over the top, it's justifiable. And this is actually, unfortunately, why you think about how talk about, like, I was trying to explain to somebody how rape culture exists in our country, and they don't want to accept it. I'm like, okay, what do you say when somebody did something bad and they go to jail? What's the joke? Oh, the joke is how they're going to get raped. Okay, the fact that you find that joke acceptable, that tells you that you support rape culture.
Yes, pop
it's not even it's not even a joke. It's just kind of accepted that that's part of the punishment. That's part of your sentence.
That's what you get. Yeah, exactly.
It's screwed up.
That joke is actually so prevalent. It even shows up in children's media. Pop Culture Detective did a whole video about the prevalence of that joke.
Even now, after so many years of Me Too and raised awareness about, sexual assault and the way we deal with that and how fucked up our culture is toward it, like, people still make prison rape jokes.
Yeah.
And
I mean, wasn't there like a moment? I'm sorry, I want to ask.
No, please.
Wasn't there like a story recently about like a person, like hopefully like a conservative person who took part like in the January 6th riot, being sent to prison, and basically she was like a trans woman, but she was like sent to a male prison, and then the entire like liberal community was like, no, this is not right. And basically the response was, why do you care? She's conservative, she's like not on your side, why do you even care?
That is
I heard that story,
Oh.
and I heard a lot of people say, yeah, we don't care if she's like conservative or January 6th writer. This is unacceptable. We know what's going to happen there, and this is not the kind of punishment we support.
No,
And,
there should be a bare minimum of humane treatment that applies
Yeah.
to everybody, and being treated according to your actual gender, if you're a trans person, should be part of that. And it doesn't matter what your politics are, and it doesn't matter what you did. If you're a trans person and you're a fucking serial killer and you get arrested for killing 6 or 7 people, you know, hopefully, if you're guilty, you get convicted and go to prison for a long time. But while you're in prison, you get treated humanely, just like any other prisoner. And if you're, you know, like that should be part of the bedrock of the justice system. Yeah, let's punish people who do horrible things. Let's segregate dangerous people from society if necessary, but don't mistreat them unnecessarily and don't abuse them, or, you know, like it's not supposed to. It practically is this way, but it's not supposed to be that way.
And this is actually the biggest problem with the just comply bullshit, because at the end of the day, it's an acquiescence to the idea that, well, hey, you know what? You know, the police are that's just gonna happen. They're gonna abuse if you're not a meek, you know, like slave, they're going to abuse you, and that's just the way it is. No, fuck no. A million times no.
Yeah. I need to assert something here, if you don't mind. There was a time when the police were held to a much higher standard than they are right now, and not just held to a standard. They were hired against a higher standard, and they were held to that standard. I don't know whether things started to go south with Rodney King, although they probably went south long before that. Of course, you got the whole history of the '60s. And the crap that was going on in the Deep South, and that's a whole story on its own. But the blunt end of the stick is, I mean, when I learned that after Tamir Rice was killed, that guy had been a police officer that was fired from another organization that was subsequently hired by the Cleveland police force, and apparently either wasn't vetted or was insufficiently vetted. I mean, sorry, no. I mean, the standards have slipped. We've let them slip, and a lot of what, you know, Joe and Edie and people like them are facing are a direct result of the standards basically falling down a bottomless pit.
There's a whole sad, incredibly frustrating history just in New York City. I learned this a couple years ago when I was doing a video about police unions. Relatively recently, starting in the 60s, there was a movement in New York City to establish an actual civilian review board for the NYPD that would actually have teeth and be able to enforce things, you know, that would have oversight of the NYPD but would be separate from it. And the NYPD, and specifically the police unions, fought relentlessly against this, fought tooth and nail to prevent it. And for the most part ended up winning. They did end up establishing a civilian review board, but it basically has no actual power. It doesn't really have any enforcement authority.
No.
And you know, so they ended up mostly the police union mostly won. They got what they wanted. And you know, and just ask yourself, why would they, if they're all doing their jobs, and or most of them are doing their jobs, if it's just a few bad apples, like we always hear, you know, when the
but
police
remember the phrase when you say that, Steve, it's a few bad apples that spoils the whole barrel.
Witness George Floyd. They had the one guy with his knee on the guy's neck. You had 3 other people around him who saw that and did nothing.
One was training too.
Not even did nothing. Made sure that no one else intervened.
Here's another example, and this wasn't even a race thing. An elderly woman who had dementia. She accidentally shoplifted some stuff from Walmart. They came outside and grabbed her. They took the stuff back in, but somebody had called the police. She's walking home in her, stupor, and the police find her, and she's like confused because she doesn't know what's going on. She has dementia.
Right.
And yet, what did they do? The cop dislocated her shoulder, and then when they went back to the station, they watched the video and they laughed about it. This is a sociopath. You do not make excuses for fucking sociopaths. And here's the other thing. As far as the whole two bad apples bullshit, it's not the apples. The tree, the roots of the tree are rotten.
The orchard.
And the proof of this is that there was nothing happened to those cops for over a year until the family's lawyer got a hold of the videos and made them public. Then they replaced the chief of police, and then there was accountability. So that means all the leadership, they knew what happened. They knew they had sociopaths in their midst, and they were fine with it. You cannot submit to that. Ever.
I have people in my extremely extended family, right? Like people I really don't talk to all that much, but are, that I'm related to, who are in law enforcement. And as far as I know, none of them has ever been accused of doing anything awful, right? And even on occasion, I've heard them express, exasperation or frustration with cops, who are charged with abuses and stuff like that. The sort of like, oh, these guys, they make it tough for the rest of us, right? But these same people, on occasion, when they're with family and friends and they feel comfortable and they feel safe, have expressed the most awful opinions about the people that they are supposed to be protecting. Making fun of people who live on low incomes, that they get a call to go to like a housing project, and making fun of or denigrating and mocking the way people live, the state of their apartments, the state of their cars, if they have one, making fun of, if it's a person of a different race, the way they talk, the way they act, the way they dress, it's like there's no sense of duty, of responsibility, of connection. Yeah, it's like, even if you haven't crossed a line and, done something like actually physically harmed a person or infringed on someone's rights or abused someone, just the fact that you have these thoughts, not only you have these thoughts in your head, but that you feel comfortable sharing them with people, with people who know that you're a cop. And you're
like, it's a cult. They only see other cops as humans.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That reminds me. Thank you. I'm glad you said that. Seattle, a few weeks ago, a grad student, a woman of, I think she's of East Indian descent. Cops were going to an emergency, whipping through the streets at 74 miles an hour, and having been in Seattle a week ago, that's really fucking dangerous.
Yes.
But, runs her over. Her body flies 100 feet away. Cops talking about her now dead corpse, saying she was of little value. These are sociopaths. Stop carrying water for sociopaths.
We heard that. So I live in Portland now, and like I said, I'm on a part business, part family trip back here to New York. But when we heard that down in Portland, we were just like, there was a real concern that there was going to be another riot in Portland. And it took a lot of instead of having somebody from the police department talk to people, what we do is down in Portland, at least, and it's still in kind of like in a trial mode. We have people who go to a lot of young people and try to say, hey, let's talk about things. And but yeah, it's that we heard that, and it was just like, what evil is this? Only that's all you can call it. And it's not just one example. It's how these apples are actively spoiling the entire barrel. The entire barrel is sour. It smells bad. The fruit is corrupted.
Yeah.
And if something's corrupted and smells bad and looks bad, how can you trust it, right? You can't. And so, and I'm not big up in Portland because we got problems. But part of the reason why we voted in certain ways and we're doing certain things now, and it's not perfect, but we're trying, is because we do realize, if it comes to de-escalation, if it comes to help with like actually getting people off the street from their drug habits and whatnot, trying to get them into shelter, things of that nature, helping somebody have a baby, or if they're having a mental health crisis, the last person you need is someone who's armed.
Right. Yeah. And here's one thing too. So the person that I'm arguing with is in the chat is saying that, oh, the police are people. That's right. So were the Nazis. So were the people who implemented the pogroms. So were the slave owners. Just because someone, So, and here's the thing. I don't wish bad things on police. I want them to do better. I want them to be better. Yeah. And if they have members of theirs that aren't going to do better, they need to get them out of there. You can't. That's not a job where you can fuck up to that degree, because people die. And people's rights get trampled on. We cannot abide it. So yeah, they're people, but they need to be, they need to be held to a higher standard. And unfortunately, and here's what's happened over the last 30, 40 years, maybe longer. But this idea that, well, the police have a hard job, so we understand that sometimes it's got to pop off and violate somebody's rights. Here's the problem with that. We don't tolerate that from soldiers in an actual war.
Right.
Okay. Correct. We do not tolerate people who actually have real people shooting them on a daily basis. And if they cross that line, we say, no, you cannot go there. Well, right now, the police are at war with the citizens, and we actually expect less accountability from them than we do from soldiers.
Yeah. Well, it's a situation where the police departments and people that kind of take their sides in these arguments, they are demanding grace from the other side that they are not offering themselves.
Right.
It's tolerating the intolerant.
Yeah. It's like, well, you have to understand cops have a rough job. You have to understand cops are people too. You have to understand cops are under a lot of pressure. Okay. I don't know of anybody who denies that. Yeah. I don't know of anybody who denies that. The point is, that's not an excuse.
Right.
Like, that's not an excuse for
I've got to be able to maintain my, be totally even and don't raise my voice and all this. But the guy with the deadly force doesn't have to? Really?
The guy with the gun. The guy with the gun who is legally empowered to kill you doesn't have to restrain himself, but you have to.
And how hard is it really if they can just pop off whatever they want?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And here's the other part of the truth. I'm glad that Matthew brought up loggers, roofers, and steelworkers and nurses. And I looked these numbers up. There's roughly 750,000 cops at any given time. And an average year, 120 of them die while they're at work. Half of those are in accidents, heart attacks, shit like that. The other half, so roughly 60 a year, die due to the culprits, the accused, the suspect's actions, right? So, which is a tiny number that's dwarfed by how many electricians get killed every year doing their job. Okay. So this idea that, everyone acts like they're all in fucking Beirut. They're not. I mean, some cops have it really bad. They're in really bad places. And I feel for them, and I think we need to do better by them. But, and there's so many places where, like my cousin, my cousin wanted to be a cop, and his wife talked him out of it because she was afraid he was going to get killed. The town I grew up in, we had one cop die in the last 60 years on the line of duty, and it was his own fault. He was literally breaking the law and violating policy. But he was a security guard in Camden and Trenton, two of the worst towns in the fucking state of New Jersey. So it's this illusion that they're constantly, any second they could get killed. It's not true.
Yeah, it's not a uniquely dangerous occupation.
No. And quite frankly, here's what I would say for places where it is really dangerous.
Right.
Maybe what we need to do is to rotate them out, so that you're not, because we do that with soldiers, right? If you're on the front line, we try at least to rotate people out so they're not in the line of fire constantly, because it does mess people up mentally. So we maybe do that. So instead of looking at desk duty as a punishment, is say, okay, we're going to take you off because now you're going to do other important roles and you're not being punished, but we're going to allow you to like decompress and get back to normal. So when you go out there, you're not immediately trying to to kill the neighbor's dog because it barked at you.
Well, and you
know,
and
also you can address the actual needs of the community to make it less dangerous. You know,
yeah,
right, and
exactly.
that feeds into the. And I'm seriously going to end this stream in a minute, but Joe just made another.
You keep saying that, Steve.
I know, but then
he has other things to do.
We've made like some really interesting points and really said some really important things in this conversation. I think it's great, but like, Serious Mind mentioning, and maybe we can. Rotate people in and out of desk duty more often. And, like that ties into that whole, that element of like toxic masculinity involved, and not and it affects, women who are cops as well. It's like a culture that, just it pervades the whole thing. But the idea of, oh, you don't want to be on desk duty. Oh, you're not a real cop if they stick you behind a desk. It's like we've seen all these cop shows and cop movies where it's like, oh, the rogue detective who goes a little too far chasing the bad guy. I'm taking you off the streets, Callahan. You're gonna be parked behind a desk for the rest of the year. It's like it's this mentality of, oh no, please not desk duty, not that. I wouldn't be a real cop anymore.
And maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't be sending cops to a class called Killology.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
They'll probably go through their own classes on their own, though. Which is
I was going to say, you don't even need the bad apple. You don't even need the bad apple to spoil the bunch anymore. The police training is essentially a bad apple factory.
Right.
It's an
inoculant with the bad bacteria in there. Ugh.
If I can make one suggestion for both Steve and Geek's benefit. Geek, I know about a half hour ago you put the charity links in the chat.
Yes,
you might want to
maybe put them back up.
Yes. Yeah, they should make cops go take a class called "You Don't Have to Be Killing Most of These People." Like that should be the name of the class.
Steve, I'll take it one step further, and I think I recommended this some time ago. Why isn't there a bachelor's of science and arts in law enforcement?
Yeah,
well,
I'm serious.
Criminal studies.
A 4-year degree. A 4-year degree instead of a few months training.
Well,
that class should be called Top No Gun.
Yes. Yes.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, how about this? We make college free for everybody, and then we require a 4-year degree before you become a fucking cop. So it's not like a 6-week training course and then here's your gun and your badge, go off, enforce the law. It's like, no, we make education more accessible to everybody. And then say, okay, if you want to do this incredibly important job where we're giving you the power of life and death to go walk around on the streets, we're going to make sure you get serious, not just like training and skills, but serious education into what this means and what your responsibilities are before we give you this responsibility.
Bingo.
Anyway, okay. First of all, I want to say thanks to Vladimir for being with us. And by the way, congratulations on getting married.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. I really couldn't take part in most of your discussion today because not really my country, not really my story.
Yes.
Well, but you contributed a lot early on, and I know a lot of us just appreciate seeing you and knowing that you're okay.
Thanks for the opportunity. I will be willing to join you on next occasions, I think. Just again, Geek knows what to do. He knows how to warn me in advance. And
we'll leave it in Geek's capable hands.
Yeah, yes.
But
I'm always there. Yeah, always. But yeah.
Yeah, and Geek, you have is today Social Justice Alchemy? And
it is.
It's a big milestone, right?
It's the 250th episode, as it were. And I was just like, what can I do? I did ask Steve, but he's busy. No promise to Steve. I asked Chris Yossi, but I don't think she's on the health side of Twitter. I don't blame her. But I came up with another idea and it takes little work for me as possible, viewer colon show. So the details will be like on the show. Say it there. So yes, like the 250 episodes, so it's just alchemy. But like, Steve, if people want to partake in a hangout like this, because this looks like fun. It usually is fun other times.
I love how Chuck floats around it. What the fuck was that? We do this. We do this once a month. It's for Patreon patrons and YouTube channel members. And obviously, I had to do this time. We had a full house this time, which was awesome. I usually lock the Zoom call when there's 13 of us so that it's not complete chaos. But we do this once a month, and it's basically first come, first serve. I post a link to channel members and Patreon patrons about 15 minutes before showtime. And, if this is something that you're interested in doing, it's open to all members and patrons of all levels, whether you pledge $1 a month or however much more you are pledging. And we do it usually the last Sunday of every month, and we hang out for usually an hour. This one went a little longer because we had a lot of things to
longer.
Say.
I think we set a record here, Steve.
This might be it's the longest one we've done for a while.
No,
I don't know if it's the longest one we've done for a while. But yeah, so if this looks like fun to those of you who are watching, you can participate potentially by becoming a patron or a member. If you want to become a member, you just click the join button on YouTube. If you want to become a patron, you go to patreon.com/Steve Shives and become a patron by pledging there. And this one was a good one. This one was a really good one. But we have fun. We have fun every month when we do this. So it's good to see all of you. It's especially good to see you, Vlad. It's good to see you, Edie, joining us for the first time. And it's good to see all of the regulars as usual. And we'll be back in a month to
October 29th.
October 20. Ooh, 2 days before Halloween
and my birthday.
Bring
is it your birthday?
Oh,
right.
Halloween's my birthday. Yeah.
Halloween's your birthday. Oh, that's right. How you told me. Huh?
Bring back the Stuffy show.
Damn Skippy.
I'm doing the shorts. And I'm working up to doing more, longer stuff. It's a process.
Okay.
But yeah, believe me, if it was up to me and money was not a problem and views and all, if I could just, if we had universal basic income where I was independently wealthy and I could just do whatever I wanted for free, I would be doing nothing but Stuffy videos. They are my favorites. I love the Stuffy videos.
Well, Steve, if business keeps going the way it does, and in a couple of years I can sell and get out and have a big pile of cash, I may have to commission many videos.
Hey,
yes.
I'm open. I'm open to discussing it.
Yes.
But because nobody loves the stuff. Believe me, nobody loves doing Stuffy videos more than I.
Steve is not open to. Steve is not above Stuffy bribery.
I'm not. Yeah, as long as I have creative control over the final product, I'm willing to talk about this. But yeah.
Well, Steve, who else would have creative control?
Well, I mean, I don't know if Joe would be like, if it's my money, I want final cut. I'm like, we'll have to have some give and take.
Maybe the odd cameo with a new character or something.
Hey, there you go. We could totally figure out like a character you could voice or something. That would be.
That'd be awesome. I'd love to do that.
I'd be fine with that.
Make it a Patreon video or a Patreon pledge goal.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for joining this month. We'll see you next month, and I'll see you, of course, a whole bunch in between now and then with all kinds of other videos. So have a good rest of your weekend and take care, everybody. See you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
So, Steve, before you